Welcome to the Deep Dive Library, where we don't just read books, we break them down to the bone. If you're hungry for insights, driven by growth, and ready to apply real lessons for the world's most powerful books, you're in the right place. Subscribe, comment, and share so you never miss an episode we upload, because the next idea we uncover could be the one that changes everything for you. Hit that bell and let's dive deep. Today, we're tackling Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. We want to give you a shortcut to the core principles without it feeling overwhelming. So Thiel kicks things off right away by challenging conventional wisdom. He hits you with this question: what important truth do very few people agree with you on? Kind of curveball, isn't it? Designed to make you stop and think.
It really is. And there's a sharp reason behind it. He pulls from Nietzsche this idea that, well, madness in individuals is rare, but in groups, it's actually pretty common.
Right.
Think about that. If you can spot a belief that almost everyone holds, but that's actually, delusional, you might be onto something big, some hidden truth. For anyone trying to innovate, that kind of contrarian thinking is, well, it's gold.
He doesn't waste time, throws us straight into the late 90s internet bubble.
Wow. I mean, the idea back then was basically that losing money was fine, that page views were the real currency.
Yeah, it sounds completely nuts now, right?
Totally.
But it fueled this crazy intense period, September 98 to March 2000, basically. Launch parties everywhere, people becoming paper millionaires overnight, quitting stable jobs.
Yeah.
It was a frenzy.
So what's a big takeaway from that chaos for us listening?
Well, the core insight is really about the danger of groupthink, of getting swept up in these popular delusions, especially when it comes to markets.
Right.
Just because everyone believes something doesn't make it true. Thiel's point is you've got to cultivate your own independent thought. Look past the hype. And PayPal's own story during that time is fascinating. They were in the middle of it, but apparently felt kind of uneasy, even with their own big idea, a new internet currency.
Yeah, which was super bold itself. But they were met with skepticism. And their first try, beaming money between Palm Pilots, didn't exactly set the world on fire.
Huh. Yeah, I remember Palm Pilots. So what did they actually learn from surviving that bubble and the crash that followed?
It definitely taught some tough lessons. But Thiel noticed something interesting. The reactions after the bubble burst became their own kind of dogma. Things like only make small, incremental advances.
Right.
Stay lean and flexible, maybe even avoid having a solid plan. Focus on beating your competitors. Prioritize the product above everything, including sales.
So the standard post-bubble advice.
Exactly. But Thiel pushes back. He argues sometimes boldness is better, sometimes a flawed plan is way better than no plan at all. Sometimes creating a whole new market is better than fighting over an existing one. And crucially, sales matter just as much as the product. So the real insight for you is, don't just blindly follow the pendulum swing. Don't react to past mistakes by adopting a whole new set of rigid rules. You always have to think for yourself, critically.
That flows right into his next big point, doesn't it? This fundamental split between monopoly and competition.
It does.
He asks another one of those big questions: what valuable company is nobody building? And then immediately dives into creating value versus capturing value. The airline Google example really nails this.
It's a perfect example. Airlines create massive value, right?
Yeah.
Connecting the whole world. But their profit margins, razor thin.
Yeah.
Then you look at Google, also creates value, obviously, but they capture a huge slice of the economic pie. Why?
Market power.
It really boils down to market power. Thiel lays out how perfect competition, which, economists often love, means undifferentiated products. Everyone's basically the same. So profits get competed away. It's a race to the bottom, long term. A monopoly, though, and he means the good kind, the one you build through innovation, by offering something truly unique, that kind of company owns its market. It can set prices. It can actually aim for profits.
So it's not just about having a good idea.
Exactly. Creating value isn't enough. You've got to build something distinct enough, something unique enough that you can actually capture a good chunk of the value you create. That's the core insight there.
And then he really goes after this almost sacred American idea of competition being the ultimate good.
Yeah, he challenges it directly. Says capitalism is fundamentally about accumulating capital, right? But perfect competition actively stops that from happening.
Huh. Never thought of it quite like that.
And then he talks about the lies companies tell about their competitive landscape. It's kind of funny in a dark way.
How so? Break that down.
Well, companies that aren't monopolies try desperately to look unique. They define their markets super narrowly, like We're the only restaurant serving authentic British food on this specific block in Palo Alto.
Right, carving out a tiny niche to seem special.
Exactly. They exaggerate their differences. But then the actual monopolies, they do the opposite. They disguise their dominance by framing their market as broadly as possible. Think Google talking about the huge competitive search or advertising or even technology market.
To make themselves look like just one player among many.
Precisely. So the insight for you is to be really aware of how market definitions get manipulated, both by others trying to position themselves, and maybe even how you might be defining your own space.
He also paints a pretty stark picture of what intense competition actually looks like in practice. The constant pressure on margins, low wages. He even uses that grim example of the chef.
He does. It's brutal. And it really sets up his counter-argument that monopolies, because they aren't constantly fighting for sheer survival, actually have the luxury to think about other things.
Like what?
Like treating workers well, investing in long-term research, focusing on product quality, even ethics. He mentions Google's old "don't be evil" motto. Part branding, sure, but also, he argues, something made possible by their financial stability, their monopoly position.
Okay, that makes sense.
He calls it monopoly capitalism. These creative monopolies, they take profit, yes, but they also drive progress by creating completely new forms of abundance. Think about the iPhone. It wasn't just competing, it created a whole new category, massive new value.
So progress isn't always driven by companies fighting each other tooth and nail.
That's his argument. He sees the history of tech as often being about better monopolies replacing older ones. IBM, then maybe AT&T, then Microsoft. Each built something dominant for a time.
And he takes a shot at economists obsessed with competition.
A bit, yeah. Calls it physics envy, this focus on equilibrium, which in business he suggests is like stagnation, like death almost. His main point is that real success comes from doing something others cannot do. Monopoly isn't the flaw, it's the condition of nearly every truly successful business.
Okay, so if brutal competition is bad, how do you avoid it? This leads to the last mover advantage, right?
Exactly. Avoid the war if you can, because war is costly. He uses the mobile credit card reader example. Square came out, then suddenly you had tons of copycats just fiddling with the shape of the dongle.
Right, minor tweaks, not real innovation.
Yeah, focusing on superficial differences instead of anything substantive, it just shows how competition can become this expensive distraction. The insight is aim to be the last major development in a particular market, not necessarily the first.
And then there's that really interesting, maybe slightly controversial point about social skills or lack thereof.
The Asperger's like social ineptitude idea. Yeah, it's provocative.
What's the thinking there? That being less tuned into social cues makes you less likely to just copy others.
That seems to be the core idea. Maybe a certain detachment from what everyone else is doing, from the herd mentality, makes you more likely to pursue something genuinely original. It's about fostering that independent thought we talked about earlier. And he links this competitive mimicry to bubbles, too, like the online pet store craze back in the day. A potentially okay idea gets flooded with investment purely because everyone else is doing it. It becomes a frenzy.
And the PayPalX.com story fits here too.
Definitely. They were locked in this intense battle head-to-head. But ultimately, Thiel says it was kind of a distraction from the real threat, which was the whole dot-com bubble bursting around them. They eventually merged, partly out of necessity.
So competition can actually blind you.
It can. It can make you focus on rivals instead of opportunities, or rivals instead of existential threats. The insight is, yeah, sometimes you might have to fight.
But if you do,
win decisively, win quickly. Don't get stuck in these long, drawn-out battles over, trivial things. He uses that Hamlet line, greatly to find quarrel in a straw. Don't fight for scraps.
Gotcha. So the last mover advantage isn't about being slow. It's about aiming for dominance in the end.
Precisely. It's about being the final defining player in a specific market so you can enjoy those long-term monopoly-like profits. And the strategy: start small, dominate a niche, really own it, and then scale up.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. This whole luck versus skill debate in the chapter, You Are Not a Lottery Ticket, this is a big one.
Huge. Thiel points out how many incredibly successful people, he mentions Gladwell, Buffett, Bezos, Gabos, often credit a lot of their success to luck, timing, being in the right place.
Which seems humble, right?
It does. But then he contrasts that with serial entrepreneurs. Think Jobs, Dorsey, Musk. They tend to put much more emphasis on skill, on vision, on actually making it happen through execution.
And Dorsey's tweet, "Success is never accidental," really stirred things up.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Brought up all sorts of debates about privilege versus effort. It's complex. So what's Thiel's take?
He argues that, look, when you're dealing with one unique company, one specific founding story, statistics about general luck don't really tell you much.
Yeah.
Every company is a sample size of one, in a way. He even brings up older views of luck, like from Emerson or the explorer Amundsen, where luck wasn't just random chance, but something you could kind of prepare for, maybe even master, through hard work and foresight.
Interesting. And this leads him to that key distinction he makes about attitudes towards the future, right? Definite versus indefinite.
Exactly. The indefinite attitude is all about process, keeping options open. He uses the example of the student loading up on extracurriculars just to have a diverse resume without a clear goal.
Keeping doors open, but maybe not actually walking through any of them with purpose.
Right. And Thiel argues this often leads to, well, mediocrity, a lack of focus.
Okay, so what's the alternative? The definite attitude.
That's about having firm convictions, believing you can shape the future. It involves figuring out the one best thing to do and then pouring your energy into that. Real focus.
And he sees this indefinite thinking creeping into lots of areas. Finance, politics.
Yeah. Indefinite finance.
Yeah.
Focusing on moving money around, maybe making money from money without necessarily building new things of value. Relying heavily on diversification because you don't have strong convictions about any single investment.
Just hedging bets everywhere.
Pretty much. Indefinite politics. Leaders shaping their message based on polls, focusing on tactics over substance. Indefinite science. Maybe relying more on random experimentation or big data mining than on developing bold new theories.
So what's the big danger he sees in all this indefinite optimism?
The danger is progress without a plan. Just assuming things will kind of get better on their own, like evolution. He argues strongly for the return of design. He says Steve Jobs' greatest design wasn't the iPhone's look, it was Apple's multi-year strategic plan.
Wow, that's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah, so he really emphasizes the power of planning, of having a definite vision. He uses the Yahoo Facebook example. Yahoo couldn't value Facebook properly because Facebook had this definite long-term plan Yahoo didn't fully grasp. His core message here is clear. You are not a lottery ticket. Stop waiting for luck. We need to get back to actively building a definite future. And startups, for him, are like the main arena where this kind of focused, definite mastery can happen.
Which leads very nicely into follow the money and the power law.
Right. He starts with compound interest, even uses that Einstein quote that might not actually be Einstein's just to get us thinking about exponential growth. Then the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. The idea that a small number of inputs often drive the majority of outputs.
Yeah, familiar concept.
But then he expands this into the power law, which describes even more extreme imbalances. Distributions where a tiny few have wildly disproportionate results. He uses examples like earthquakes, city sizes, and crucially, company success.
And venture capital is his prime example here, isn't it?
Absolutely. A tiny handful of VC investments generate almost all the returns for a fund. Most investments actually fail or return very little. The winners win big, exponentially bigger than the others.
It's a brutal distribution.
It is. And what's interesting is he says even VCs often underestimate just how extreme the power law is. They might still spend too much time on average companies or trying to fix broken ones instead of doubling down on the potential mega winners.
So it's counterintuitive even for the people living it.
Seems so. He points out the huge impact these venture-backed companies have. Small percentage of total businesses, but massive share of job creation and revenue. But his main point is that this power law thinking applies to everyone.
How so? Because we're all making investments of our time and energy.
Exactly. Your career choice is an investment. Starting a company is a huge investment. And if you understand the power law, it changes how you think. He slams the idea of diversification for people who really understand this.
So focus your bets.
Yeah. He argues that the best investors, the ones who get the power law, make as few bets as possible, but with very high conviction. And for individuals, especially entrepreneurs, he says, life is not a portfolio. You can't diversify your own life. You have to go all in on your best bet.
That really contrasts with how schools often teach things, right? Be well-rounded, hedge your bets.
Totally. He critiques schools for promoting this homogenized knowledge, this model student who keeps all options open. His advice: find something you're exceptionally good at, something that would be really valuable in the future, and focus relentlessly on that.
Or join a company that's already hitting that exponential growth curve.
Right. Join the best company you can find while it's growing fast. And if you do start your own thing, remember the power law applies there too. One market, one distribution channel will likely dominate. Find it and nail it.
His final warning on this is powerful. Don't trust a world that denies the power law to frame your big decisions. Think really hard about where your efforts will actually land on that curve.
Okay, let's talk secrets. This chapter feels really central to the whole 0 to 1 idea.
It really is. It ties back to that contrarian question. Thiel's core argument is that the truly valuable, game-changing companies are built not on common knowledge, but on finding and acting on important truths that most people don't see or believe yet. These are the secrets.
But why don't more people look for them? It touches on a few reasons, really.
There's the fear, the fear of being wrong and looking foolish, or even being right but being alone in that belief. There's maybe complacency, especially among people who are already successful within the current system.
Right, why rock the boat?
Exactly. And he also mentions the flatness idea, the sense maybe from globalization that all the big discoveries have been made, all the low-hanging fruit picked.
Which leads to this kind of cynical take he has, that it's harder to start like a real transformative movement today because people are less open to weird new ideas.
Sort of. Fewer people take really unorthodox ideas seriously, which maybe prevents cults, but also, he worries, kills off some of the wonder and the potential for major breakthroughs.
He calls this the world according to convention, the belief that we've basically figured everything out.
And he points to things like the efficient market hypothesis in economics, the idea that markets are perfectly rational, and then points to bubbles as clear evidence that's not true. He uses HP's decline as an example of a company losing its innovative edge, losing its belief in finding new secrets.
But great companies are still being built on secrets, he argues, like Airbnb or Uberlift.
Exactly. Those were built on open but unsuspected secrets. Seeing massive untapped supply, empty rooms, people's cars, and unmet demand, and connecting them in a new way. It wasn't hidden, but most people didn't see the opportunity.
And he distinguishes between secrets about nature and secrets about people.
He does. Secrets of nature are like scientific discoveries. Secrets about people are about understanding human behavior, markets, what people want but maybe can't articulate, or even what's taboo or not allowed to be discussed. He thinks these people secrets are often really undervalued.
So where should you look for secrets?
Where nobody else is looking. In fields that matter but maybe aren't standardized yet, where there's still room for fundamental insights. He mentions nutrition as a possible example.
And once you find a secret, keep it quiet.
Not entirely. His advice is basically, tell who you need to tell and no one else. He frames a startup itself as a kind of conspiracy to change the world. The point is, you don't have to follow the obvious path. Look for those hidden routes.
Moving on to foundations. This chapter really stresses how crucial those early days of a company are.
Absolutely critical. He argues that beginnings are special, almost set in stone in some ways. Bad decisions made early on, picking the wrong co-founder, making bad initial hires are incredibly hard to fix later.
He calls choosing a co-founder founding matrimony, right?
Yeah, it's like getting married.
Yeah.
He tells a story about a doomed venture involving someone wanting to co-found with an NBA player they barely knew. It highlights the importance of having a shared history, a real connection with your co-founders.
Okay, makes sense. And then he gets into ownership versus possession versus control.
Yeah.
What's the distinction there?
Ownership is the legal title, like who owns the shares. Possession is about day-to-day operations, who's actually running things. Control is the formal governance, like the board of directors. These things need to be aligned.
And misalignment causes problems.
Big problems, like the classic principal-agent problem, where managers' interests diverge from the owners. He emphasizes getting the structure right early on to keep everyone rowing in the same direction long-term. And equity is key here.
How so?
Cash rewards past work, right? But equity, stock options, that aligns people with creating future value. It's about the long haul.
But how do you divide it up? He says equal shares can be a mistake.
Often, yeah. But also, starting with big, obvious differences can create resentment from day one. He suggests that maybe keeping the initial equity split somewhat confidential, at least at the very beginning, might actually be the least bad option sometimes. The main point is that how you handle equity reveals who's truly committed for the long term.
And the founding isn't just a single moment.
Right. He argues the founding lasts as long as the company keeps creating, keeps inventing. It's an ongoing spirit of innovation.
Let's talk about the mechanics of mafia. That's a provocative title. What's he getting at with company culture?
He's pushing beyond just free snacks and ping pong tables. He argues for building a team that's truly united by a shared, compelling mission, almost like a tight-knit group on a quest.
And the PayPal Mafia is the prime example. That group is legendary.
Exactly. All those early PayPal employees who went on to found or fund Tesla, LinkedIn, YouTube, Yelp, SpaceX, incredible success. He attributes a lot of that to the intense shared culture they built at PayPal, a bond that lasted long after they left.
So how do you build that? You talked about hiring conspirators.
Yeah, it's about recruiting people who aren't just looking for a job, but who are specifically excited to work with you on your mission, people who get what makes your company unique.
And bad answers to why join us are generic ones.
Right. If someone gives you reasons that could apply to any company, that's a red flag. Good answers are specific to your company's unique mission and team.
And this idea of do one thing on the inside.
That's about giving each person a clearly defined, unique area of responsibility. Reduces overlap, minimizes turf wars, and helps people build mastery and strong working relationships over time.
Because internal conflict is deadly for startups.
He calls it an autoimmune disease, and then he makes that comparison between cults and consulting firms.
Yeah, talk about extremes.
Right. One is extreme dedication, the other maybe more transactional. He suggests the best startups are somewhere in between, maybe like slightly less extreme cults, groups that are fanatically dedicated to a core belief that happens to be right, even though most people miss it.
Okay, on to sales. If you build it, will they come? He really argues against that common tech mindset, doesn't he?
He really does. Especially in Silicon Valley, there's often this bias, this belief that a great product should just sell itself. He calls that the field of dreams fallacy. Just building it is not enough.
He thinks sales and distribution are seriously underrated.
Hugely underrated. He points out the skepticism many engineers have towards sales and advertising, seeing it as superficial manipulation. But, he says, like it or not, advertising works. Sales skills are crucial.
Even hidden skills, right?
Right.
Lots of job titles don't say sales.
Exactly. Salespeople are everywhere, even if they're called business development or account executives. He argues that this ability to sell an idea, a product, a company often distinguishes the true superstars. That engineer's grail of a product that sells itself, he says flat out, it's a lie.
Wow, okay, so distribution has to be baked into the product design.
Essential. And you have to understand the economics. Your customer lifetime value, CLV, how much a customer is worth over time, has to be higher than your customer acquisition cost, how much it costs you to get that customer. Basic, but crucial.
And he lays out different distribution methods.
Yeah, a whole spectrum. From complex sales for huge deals needing personal attention, like selling rockets or big enterprise software, to personal sales teams for mid-range products, to partnerships, to mass advertising for consumer goods, all the way to viral marketing, where the product itself drives growth, like early Facebook or PayPal paying users to sign up.
And the power law shows up here too.
Definitely. He argues one distribution channel will likely be vastly more effective than all the others combined for your specific business. So don't try to do everything. Find the one that works best, and absolutely not.
And selling isn't just to customers.
Good point. You're always selling the vision to employees you want to recruit, selling the potential to investors, selling the story through PR. It's all sales in a way.
Finally, let's touch on man and machine. This tackles that big question about AI and the future of work.
Yeah, with computers getting so good at things we used to think were uniquely human, chess, Jeopardy, driving cars, the question looms, will machines replace us?
But Thiel pushes back on that simple substitution idea.
He does. His core argument is that computers are primarily complements for humans, not substitutes. They augment our abilities.
So the most valuable businesses will be the ones that empower people with technology.
That's his bet. He uses Palantir, his own company, as an example software designed to help human analysts make sense of complex data, not replace them. He sees huge potential in using tech to make professionals in fields like medicine or education much more effective.
So he's not a Luddite fearing tech, but also not a singularity believer expecting machines to take over completely.
Exactly. He steers a middle path. Forget the extremes, he says. Focus on the next few decades and how we can use technology, collaborating with computers, to build a dramatically better world.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, For you, the learner, listening to this deep dive into 0 to 1, what are the big takeaways we've hit on a lot?
I think it really gives you a powerful framework. Thinking contrarian, questioning assumptions, understanding the difference between just creating value and actually capturing it by building something unique, something monopolistic in his sense.
And the need for a definite plan, right? Not just drifting.
Absolutely. Moving away from that lottery ticket mindset and understanding the power law, how focusing your efforts on the few things that truly matter can have an outsized impact.
So maybe ask yourself again, what's that important truth few people agree with you on? Where can you question assumptions in your own work or interests?
Yeah, and how can you move beyond just doing good work to building something defensible, something that captures value? Are you approaching the future with that definite vision, or are you just keeping options open indefinitely?
This has just been a scratch on the surface, really. Thiel's book is packed with ideas that make you think about careers, business, progress.
Everything. It really invites deeper reflection. So we definitely encourage you to keep digging into these concepts. What part of this discussion stood out most to you? Any aha moments along the way? We genuinely love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks so much for joining us in the Deep Dive Library. Keep questioning, keep learning, keep building.
We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into the world's most powerful ideas.